All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Up and In Show. We are here at Cards and Culture on the Purple Couch. I got a really special guest with me today because this is one of the guys that I looked up to when I first came to LSU to play LSU Baseball here, so I'm trying not to flatter you too much. But we're talking college All-American in both base and played basketball in college, won a gold medal in the '88 Olympics, first overall pick, made his major league debut later that summer, and pitched 8 years in the major leagues? Nine years in the major leagues. Sorry, I'm not a mathematician. I was just good at throwing a baseball. But
the only reason I know that because I'm getting close to drawing my pension at
there
some
we go.
point. So,
that's right.
So I'm trying to keep up with it a little bit.
That's right,
you know?
yeah.
But yeah, it was mostly in Baltimore and a couple of years in Milwaukee.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Well, Ben McDonald, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, I gave you a little rundown, but why don't you give us a 1 minute, 2 minute thing of who you are, what you do nowadays, and that kind of stuff too.
Well, I mean, grew up in Denham Springs, Louisiana, right down the road, you know, and always was a dream of mine to play at LSU, and that's what I wanted to do. And basketball was actually my first love, and actually I was a little higher recruited out of high school to play basketball than I was baseball, which is kind of odd. But it was always the idea that I was going to do both wherever I went to school, and of course settled on LSU, you know, and played, as you mentioned, played at LSU 3 years, played a year and a half of basketball, 3 years of baseball, and then went on and started playing pro ball like a lot of guys do. And since then, you know, Skip Burtman was the one. I was retired at 30 years old. My shoulder blew out, and 3 surgeries later, and 3 years of rehab just didn't work out. And old Doc Andrews in Birmingham said, "Hey, you like to hunt, don't you?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Do you like to fish?" I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Well, go find you a fishing hole at a hunting place, because that's the worst shoulder I've ever seen." You know, after 3 surgeries, you know. And so that's kind of what I was doing. And Skip Burtman got me started in broadcast. And he said, "You know what you'd be good at?" And I was like, "Coach, I didn't even graduate. I didn't graduate from LSU. I was in broadcast journalism, but I was just kind of getting into that when I left." And so he got me hooked up with CST, Cox Sports Television, which was the only network LSU baseball was on at the time. You know, there was no SEC network and all that kind of stuff. The only time you got on big linear networks was at the College World Series. And so it started there, and that's evolved into 20-something years of calling LSU baseball, SEC baseball, college baseball, in the last 12 years doing some stuff with the Orioles. So
yeah, that was pretty cool. We were just talking about that. You're going to be in uniform in spring training and stuff like that.
I look forward to that. You know, I realize how old I am when I get there, because the analytical data is just really – it's gone to 2 different levels, you know, in the last 10 years. And but I like to be in uniform, to talk to the new players. Like we just traded for Corbin Burns. I kind of want to beat him up a little bit and talk to him a little bit and see what he likes to do. And then, of course, all the other players that are returning to the Orioles, I like to find out and talk to the pitchers and help them out whenever I can. But also figure out what they worked on in the offseason, what's different for them, what kind of new pitches you're going to have. And so it helps me with my broadcasting to kind of get a relationship going with all the players, but also kind of know what they worked on in the offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your whole life seems pretty amazing. So I'm excited to dive into this, because the hunting, the still being able to play baseball, I mean, be a part of the team, and the broadcasting and stuff like that. And you said it's 2 seasons. So you get to baseball season, hunting season. Seems like life is good.
That's all it is for me. You know, it's busy. I'm to the point in my life where a lot of my buddies I grew up with are starting to slow down in their professions. And I feel like I'm speeding up. Exactly, you know, I did 140 games last year between Orioles stuff and college stuff. So it's super busy. Honestly, I don't enjoy all the travel. I feel like I'm traveled out. But once they say play ball, like I really enjoy that part of it and calling a ball game. And it's a passion of mine. I'm very passionate about doing the game of baseball and being fair, you know. And that's my hardest thing is ex-players. When you sit up above home plate and you look out, the game looks pretty easy.
Exactly.
And one of my biggest challenges doing what I do now is remembering how difficult the game really is. And so while you have to be fair, because I have to be honest about what I see, I never demean players and tear coaches down or players. That's not what it's all about, because it's a very difficult game, as you know. But I do enjoy doing it, and I got to be honest about what I'm seeing out there. But it's fun, and as you mentioned earlier, the Orioles are a lot of fun to be around now. You know, 101 wins last year, won the AL East for the first time since 2014, in the playoffs for the first time since 16. It's an up-and-coming, young team that's going to be, I feel like there's a window for them to do really well the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, they're going to be a lot of fun. Like you said, Jackson Holliday's a really exciting prospect. You guys got a nice ace in Corbin Burns
Yes.
and stuff like that. So, yeah, I'm excited to dive into that. But I kind of want to backtrack a little bit to the beginning of your journey. You know, you said played basketball and you were more recruited as a basketball player. So I grew up in New Jersey, and that's what I did too. I was more of a basketball player. I wasn't big enough because I really played back to the basket type style, you know, and the game had changed a lot kind of when I was coming out of high school. I was better at throwing the baseball than I was at basketball. So talk to me about that decision to play both at college and how hard that was to kind of manage it for a year and a half.
It was difficult, you know.
Because it sounds like a dream to me.
Yeah, no, it was. You know, and the crazy thing is my senior year in high school, I led the state of Louisiana in punting. So I was an all-state punter too. And so
that's awesome. 6'7" punter out there too.
Yeah, barefoot punter, by the way. And so they wanted me to come punt for the football team too. And I remember, I think Jerry Ranaudo was the coach. I was like, Coach, I appreciate the offer, but like I'm having trouble making grades playing basketball and baseball, and there's no way I can do all three. And if there is one regret in my career, that might be it. Like I'd have been, once I thought about it, I was like, that'd be pretty cool to be out punting in front of 80,000 people, you know. But it worked out pretty good. But yeah, I mean, I was probably the ADD kid before that was diagnosed when I was a kid. So I liked to move. Like I had to be moving and getting up and down the court. And so basketball was my favorite sport. Basketball did not come as easy to me as what baseball did. For whatever reason, I was always big and tall like you, but I could always throw strikes. I always had a good arm. And so baseball came a little bit easier to me. Basketball was more of a challenge to me growing up. And I think that's what interests me in the game of basketball, you know, and I enjoyed doing that, and ended up coming to LSU, and you know, in '87, my freshman year, we go to the Elite Eight, which was just Bobby Knight was the game when Bobby Knight, we were playing Indiana, and Bobby Knight slammed the chair, and the phone went up in the air and all that, and Indiana went on to win the national championship that year, but we lost in the Elite Eight. Nikita Wilson took a shot with 2 seconds and went in and out. We lost by one point, you know, and so I loved basketball. But what I found out was I went off to summer ball in baseball after my freshman year. And the weird thing about that, because the seasons run together, and we went in all the way to March Madness and the Elite Eight, I missed the entire freshman pre-SEC schedule in baseball. So I didn't get out there until we had already began SEC play. Well, I got some relief appearances and a couple starts my freshman year. And then I go off to the Alaskan Summer League to play summer baseball like everybody does. Well, the fastball ticked up, and all of a sudden it ticked up to 97, 98, and I come home, and Coach Bertman goes, listen, there's a chance you could make the Olympic team after your sophomore year next year, but in order to do that, you got to be out a full year to be able to show the college people what you can do.
Right.
And so that kind of, and when I started bumping 97, there wasn't many guys doing that in 1987.
Exactly.
And so I kind of knew in the back of my mind, while I love basketball, I was like, this could be my ticket.
Right.
So I come home and I tell Dale Brown, I was like, Coach Brown, he was a basketball coach at the time. I said, listen, I'm going to bow out of basketball. Coach Bertman thinks I got a future in baseball. Fastball's doing this now. And he said, well, you're making a big mistake because I think you can play in the NBA. And I was like, Coach, I don't know about that, but I do think I can play Major League Baseball, you know. And so funny story is I bowed out, and he said, okay, but he said, I'm going to keep you on scholarship just in case you change your mind. So I stayed on basketball scholarship my sophomore year. Well, he calls me in October, and he says, Ben, can you just come back out and play? I said, Coach, what's up? He said, the entire team has come down with mono.
Oh, my God.
We don't even have enough players to even practice.
This is your sophomore year?
It's my sophomore year.
Yeah.
Will you just come out? I said, tell you what, Coach, I'll come out and help you out. I am on basketball scholarship. I love basketball, and I'm going to help you out to January 1. Okay. But when January 1 rolls around, I got to be out on the baseball field. He said, deal.
Oh, my God.
So I got to play another half a year of basketball, which I really enjoyed doing that. And then it was all baseball after that.
That's amazing. Not only did you play for Dale Brown and Skip Bertman, like two legendary coaches at the time, but to have both those legendary coaches tell you those things, how hard was that to hear from Dale Brown that you could play, and he thinks you could play in the NBA? You
know, as an 18, 19-year-old kid, it makes you wonder, am I making the right decision? You know, and it really beat me up, to be honest with you. It beat me up bad because I didn't know what decision to make, because I absolutely love Dale Brown, still do to this day. He's a wonderful man, and I love the game of basketball. But in my heart of hearts, I just felt like if I was going to make it in baseball, then I started seeing the projections. I said, okay, I think baseball is going to be my ticket. Plus, I mean, how often do you get a chance to play on an Olympic team, right? Yeah. And so that was in the back of my mind too, because probably like you and a lot of young players, I grew up watching the Summer Olympics. Like, it was one of my favorite things, and I always had a dream was like, dude, what would it be like to stand on a gold medal platform and have somebody drape a gold medal over your neck? Like, that's got to be the coolest thing in the world. Because I remember watching Carl Lewis and Greg Louganis and Edwin Moses and all the greats run track and field and swim and all that kind of stuff. And so when I got an opportunity and Coach said, there's a chance you could do that, I was like, hey, I'm all in on that. And so it worked out. I had a great sophomore year, made the Olympic team, and, of course, we went on to win the gold medal in '88, which was really cool.
Yeah, and that was in Seoul, South Korea,
Seoul, South Korea, man. And it was a real – I mean, it kind of prepared you for pro ball in some ways because it's not like it is today. Today, like, they go play 10 games and they're done.
Yeah.
I pitched 80 innings that summer.
What?
Like, we played like 60-something games. It was like a 3-month tour all around. We went to Japan twice. We went to Italy. And then we finished up in Seoul, Korea. And we had a U.S. tour, too, playing some minor league teams. So, yeah, so it was a full summer of 3.5 months of travel and all that kind of stuff. And so it was a busy time, but a very enjoyable time. You know, when you get to wear the red, white, and blue and it says USA right here, man, that's pretty special. Don't get a whole lot better than that.
That's amazing. I did not know that. 60-something. That's wild. 80 innings in the summer.
Yeah.
So when was that? So, like, you leave school. Did you guys go to the College World Series or anything that year in '88?
Yeah. No, in '88 we missed. In '87, my freshman year, we made it and lost. In '88 we missed. But, just soon after the season ended, we went to Millington, Tennessee, which is where headquarters used to be, and we had a big tryout, and they invited 40 of the best amateur players in the country to go try out, and 25 made it, you know, and so it began from there. And so, so I threw a lot that year, obviously. You know, I threw 125 at LSU my sophomore year, and I rolled that into 80, so I had a little over 200 innings in a year. Then I come back my junior year and throw another 152. Yeah. So 352 innings in 16 months.
Oh, my God.
And doctor says, well, wonder why you got a zipper.
We wonder why this.
He said that's probably one reason why, you know. But you know, we didn't count pitches a whole lot. And, you know, coach says, hey, I can do it.
Exactly.
Give me the ball.
Yeah,
give me
exactly.
the ball. You know, and so it is. I always tell people, they say, well, you were abused. I was like, no, I wasn't abused. I was a product of my time. Exactly. I wasn't the only one doing it.
Yeah, no, that's. Exactly, and like you said, competitor when coach asks you, and then we didn't have the information that we have nowadays.
Exactly.
Too. So absolutely. So I actually got a chance to play in Korea at the end of my career.
That's right.
Over in their KBO and stuff. So what was your favorite country? Did you like Seoul? What was on the tour in the Olympics?
Seoul was kind of weird because North and South Korea was kind of feuding at the time, and it was really an uneasy time. We did do the opening ceremonies, but it's weird when you got a guy riding the bus to the ballpark with you with a machine gun sitting in the back, and then you look up at the baseball field and there's snipers up in the light towers with guns too. So it was a weird kind of feeling. Once the game started, you didn't think about it anymore. It was just baseball at that point. But that was kind of weird. I enjoyed Italy. Italy was really cool. We spent 2 weeks over there. Japan, we 2 different tours in Japan, which was really, really a cool. And for a kid from Denham Springs, Louisiana, who's never really traveled a whole lot, it was some eye-opening experiences, But as you probably did, and I did too, when you're playing ball, man, you got your head down and you're focused like blinders on the job at hand. So you don't really get to enjoy. You don't think about enjoying all the cool places. But we did do some traveling as far as getting to see some really cool stuff, and over in Italy, which was a cool thing for me. And so I still have a lot of fond memories about it. And, of course, Coach Bertman was the pitching coach on that team, so that was really
there
cool
we go.
too,
That's really cool,
So, we got to experience that together, which was nice.
Yeah. So then you roll into your junior year where obviously, you've had mid-making name for yourself, but you guys go to the College World Series, you Golden Spikes winner, #1 overall. So talk to me a little bit about after that year and the hype and the, expectations now, right? Because you were basketball a little bit, now you're taking things more serious, and now there's some expectations in your junior year.
Well, I'm going to back up, and I'm going to tell you what happened to me, and you probably know this story, but my freshman year at LSU, we play in the Elite Eight in basketball, and then I get to go and play in the College World Series all in the same year as an 18-year-old, and a lot of people probably remember, older people, younger people don't, but I got put in the ball game against Stanford, and Barry Manuel, our closer, was a junior. He walked the first 2, so Coach comes and gets me in a tight ball game and puts me in the 9th inning, bottom of the 9th inning. We're up by 3 runs, and I get Ed Sprague 0-2. I hit him, load the bases, and then Paul Carey hits an opposite field grand slam over the fence.
To beat you.
It walks us off. Oh. And that was my freshman year, and that's how it ended. And I had never failed at anything sports-wise in my life. Like, I'd always been really good at basketball, football, baseball, won a state championship in high school. Then all of a sudden, man, I got hit right in the freaking head, and just, whoa, I'm on my heels. And I'm going to be honest, I went through a state of depression for a while. I went home, and it was tougher for me because I'm a hometown guy. Like, I grew up right here, and I grew up bleeding purple and gold, and all my buddies are just ribbing on me, you know, and I got to come home and face, I was the reason why we got walked off, you know. And so, man, I thought hard, and going back to that decision about basketball and baseball, I remember calling up Coach Bertman going, Coach, I don't know if this game of baseball is for me or not. Dale Brown says I can play in the NBA, and I may consider doing that. You know, I just don't know if baseball is my ticket. I was mentally just zonked for a while. And I remember Dale Brown calling and Skip Bertman calling and pepping me up a little bit. Of course, we didn't have cell phones then, so they called the house. And I talked to him like, Coach, I just don't know. And so he said, listen, I got to get you to go to Alaska. You need to go to the Alaskan Summer League. And I was due to ship off after the College World Series 1 week after we got home. And I was still kind of deciding whether I wanted to do that or not. And so Coach Brown says, Ben, this stuff's going to happen. You know who you are. Don't let one moment in time define who you are. 19-year-old kid, that makes sense. And then Bertman's kind of the same way. So Bertman calls up McFarland, who's our Alaskan League coach, and says, listen, I've talked McDonald into getting on the airplane. You get his butt in the ball game as fast as you can get him in a game because I want this behind him now. So I ship out. McFarland picks me up that day in Anchorage, Alaska at the airport, and he goes, oh, by the way, our first game is tomorrow night, and you're pitching. Well, the last ball left my hand, went for a home run over the fence. And so I did not sleep a wink that night. Like, just didn't sleep, sweating, going, okay, is this really for me? Do I want to go through this? I just don't know. Well, I get to the ballpark the next day, and it's like 45 minutes before game time. I'm getting dressed, putting my spikes on, getting ready to go warm up. And McFarland, our coach, walks in with a piece of paper. It's folded up, and he hands it to me, and he walks off. And the only thing he says is this how you want to be remembered? So I open it up, and I'm looking at it. The other coach on the other team thought it'd be funny if he filled out a lineup card that said Paul Carey, 1 through 9 on the lineup card. Wow. Paul Carey's not even playing in the Alaskan Summer League that summer. He's just being funny, being a jerk. So, you know, sometimes you need that little extra kick in your rear end, something to kind of get you over the top.
That's why 97, 98 started coming out.
That was the defining moment in my career because I folded that piece of paper up and I stuck it right in the top of my locker and I put my spikes on and I went and warmed up. 2.5 hours later, I'd thrown a 2-hit shutout and punched out 14. And as they say, the rest is history. And I took that, and I wasn't sarcastic, but I grabbed that piece of paper after the game and I gave it to our clubhouse guy. I said, you go give that to that coach over there and you tell him thank you. And I didn't mean it from a sarcastic, I meant it from, I needed that. As bad as it hurt when I first opened it, I needed that moment to kind of get me over the top. And as they say, the rest is kind of history, you know. And so I rocked along, and then I come from the Olympics where I was an underclassman. Most everybody, Jim Abbott, Andy Bennett was #1 pick in the country. Abbott was 4th. Tino Martinez, all those guys, they were all going to play pro ball. I was an underclassman. I was going back to LSU. And so I kind of got tabbed then. Well, if McDonald stays healthy, he'll be the first pick in the country before the season even started. And honestly, I tell people this all the time. I didn't enjoy my junior year at LSU as much as I probably should have because you mentioned the word expectations, which is an awful word sometimes. You went through that. I went through it. And I remember going out and giving up, pitching 9 innings at LSU, striking out 13 or 14, but giving up 3 runs. And some reporter goes, what happened? You gave up 3 runs. I went, that's Florida. That's the #2 team in the country. I just punched out 14 and threw a complete game, and we won, but it wasn't good enough. And then I started trying to live up to even more expectations, and I didn't really get to enjoy my junior year like maybe I should have, trying to live up to a lot of different things. It was fun. I enjoyed it. We won 56 ball games, went to the College World Series, all those things. It was really an enjoyable year in some ways, but in other ways, it was a stressful year, and I was so glad when the draft, and the draft's in a better place now. The draft used to be right in the middle of the College World Series.
What?
Yes.
Oh
so I was pitching that night in the opening game in Omaha against the University of Miami, I had to go to a press conference at 12 o'clock noon because I had just gotten drafted #1 overall, so I had to go do a big interview with 100 different reporters and then try to pitch that night. So I'm so glad they moved the draft around to where players now kind of enjoy it with their families and their friends and all that, and not be playing baseball while it's going on. So it sped up really quick. That year went by super fast and a lot of expectations, but I was so glad when the draft was over and I was going to be off playing pro ball.
You said expectations is a heavy word, and it really is. And it's funny how I remember my freshman and sophomore year, I felt I had a lot to prove. I was a kid from Jersey, right? And then we did it all. We won the national championship my sophomore year, came into the year projected #1 overall, same thing, right? It messed me up, and it really did. And I exactly what you said was, obviously I was good enough to be in that sentence, but I felt like I needed to work harder, do more, and nothing was good enough. So it's interesting you say. I like hearing. It makes me feel a little bit more sane.
I think it's only natural. As young kids, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves sometimes, and the expectation. And you learn as you go through this process how to mentally block out certain things. And be honest, it got worse once I got into pro ball because I was in the big leagues at 21, as you mentioned. I went straight from, I got 2 starts in the minors after I signed, and I was in the big leagues. And didn't have a clue about how to set up hitters. Coach Bertman called every pitch I ever threw. And so I never really thought about how to set up a hitter. And all of a sudden I'm facing the best hitters in the world, and now I'm calling my own game. And so it became even more difficult. And Frank Robinson, the Hall of Famer, was my manager then. And I remember he called me in my first full year, and he goes, "Hey, listen, you're pitching opening day, and you got to win 20 games this year if the Orioles have a chance." And I said, "Skip, I'm 22 years old. I've got 6 innings in the big leagues." But that was the pressure that he put on me. And then all of a sudden, I tried to start living up to those expectations. And man, there were some dark times my first couple of years where I went home and banged my head on the wall after bad outings, wondering why I couldn't have success in the big leagues. What's the problem? What am I doing wrong? And it's hard to be patient and try to learn. It's one thing to learn in the minor leagues, and that's difficult to do. But when you're learning in front of 35 or 40,000 people every night as a 21, 22-year-old, it's even more difficult to do. So there were some bad moments for me. And finally, Cal Ripken Jr. pulled me to the side one day about halfway through my first full year, and he's like, "Listen, get rid of all the BS. Get rid of it. Don't try to live up to expectations. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to come to the ballpark like you've been doing every day. Continue to work your tail off every day. This is going to change. You're going to get some innings under your belt. You're going to feel better about yourself." And he said, matter of fact, he walked in one time, and Chris Hoyles was a young catcher, and he goes, after one game I pitched, I was 22, and he walks in, he sticks his head in there. Me and Chris are having a beer or two after the game, just like, what went wrong, man? And he goes, "You boys don't have a clue of what you're doing, do you?" And I was like, "No, sir, Mr. Ripken, I don't have a clue of what I'm doing." And he said, "Would you like some help?" I said, "Yeah, from the Iron Man?" "Sure." Any kind of help would be wonderful. He said, "Tell you what I'm going to do." And he sat down and grabbed the beer. And it was just us 3 talking. He said, "This is what I'm going to do." He said, "I'm fixing to start calling every pitch you throw." I said, "Wait a minute, Rip. How you going to go catch now?" He said, "No, I'm going to do it from shortstop." I was like, "What are we talking about here?" So him and Chris Hoyles came up with a system. It was funny. I'd be looking in at Chris Hoyles, but I could see Chris Hoyles' eyes, and they're going over my right shoulder where Cal's standing at shortstop. And the way Cal held it, and Junior made this point, he said, "This stays in this triangle." He said, "If the pitching coach, the manager, or anybody else finds out about this, I'm out."
Wow.
I said, "Okay." So I was struggling, so I trusted him. And all of a sudden, things started to click a little bit. And after every game, me and Chris Hoyles and Cal would sit down with a couple of beers, and we would talk about, okay, this is the reason why we threw Molitor like this in this situation. This is why we pitched Winfield like this. This is why we pitched Boggs like this with a runner on second base versus when nobody's out. And I went, "Ooh, I never thought about that. You can't pitch these big league hitters the same way every time." And he's like, "Listen, with 2 out, nobody on, sometimes you got to pitch Boggs to his strength. Make him think. But when you got to get him out, and it's the 7th inning, and it's a tie ball game, and that winner runs out at second base, now we're going to get him out a different way." And I went, "Whoa, man, this is like next level stuff." And so that was my maturing process. Cal Ripken Jr., and he wrote it in one of his books. It's a whole chapter about how he did this and how we would sit down and talk about how to attack hitters and why we did that. So that was kind of my learning at the big league level. And after that first full year, he said, "You're on your own. You guys are ready to do it now. You ever need any help? I'm just standing 60 feet behind you back here. I'm always ready to help. And so Junior was a big part of my maturing process at the big league level.
That's got to be one of the coolest stories I've ever heard on this podcast. I mean, just in general. That's amazing. Just a kid growing up in Jersey, right? Like Cal Ripken Jr. was huge for me in that. That's amazing. That's really cool. And it's in his book, too?
It's in his book.
Oh,
yeah,
my God. I want to go read that.
There's a whole chapter in it. Yeah, and so he was big. I think Junior he was from a small town, Aberdeen, Maryland. I'm from a small town. He had a lot of pressure. I think for whatever reason, me and him really hit it off. I just talked to him yesterday. He called because he's one of the new owners now. With the Orioles just sold, and he's part of the new ownership group. So I'm excited for him about that. So we've stayed in touch about that over the years, you know. And so he's a cool guy, you know. And for him to take a liking to me, I certainly appreciate that as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask what kind of leadership you had, you know, especially as a 21-year-old, 22-year-old coming up. So I think that answered it pretty safely. Yeah. I was going to ask what kind of teammate he was and that kind of stuff. So sounds like he was a pretty
awesome
great
guy.
teammate. Yeah.
I always tell people, as far as real superstars go, he's probably the most genuine, down-to-earth, real superstars that you'll ever meet. You know, he just gets it, and he was a big part. And then a year later, because, you know, we had a really young pitching staff then, so I didn't have any veteran guys to really bump stuff off of. So I kind of leaned on the position player, and he was really the only veteran on that team. A year later, Rick Sutcliffe came over, and he kind of took me to the next level of, okay, you know, this is what we're going to do. And Sut's famous thing to me was, you know, he pulled me to the side in spring training one time. He grabbed me by the jersey. He said, listen.
This guy's intense.
He said, do you want to be a nice guy, or do you want to win games at the big league level? And I mean, he's got.
And he's a big dude.
250.
Yeah.
He's my height, 50 pounds heavier.
Yeah.
And I said, Mr. Sutcliffe, I want to win games. That's what I want to do. He said, well, this is what we're going to start doing then. He said, you got to put the fear of God in these hitters now, because when I'm watching you pitch, you're throwing 95 to 98, and these guys are too comfortable in the box. So here's what we're going to do. For the next 7 starts, somebody in every lineup's getting dropped.
Let's go.
He said, I'm not telling you to hit anybody, but he said, they're going to hear it coming. And he said, if you don't do it, I'm going to be waiting on the top step to come find you. I said, all right. And sure enough, man, I started getting myself in some situations where some guys are leaning out over the plate. I can start to see what he's talking about now. So I start throwing some balls. They had bad intentions, right? They were supposed to be up in here, and I was dropping the guy. I even hit a few guys, you know, and all of a sudden, the outside part of the plate started to open up, and I went, might be something to this, you know. And then I kind of got to where I enjoyed it a little bit, you know. And so and getting to talk to Nolan Ryan early in my career, and he told me the same thing. He said, you got to have one half of the plate. He's going to have one side, but you got to have your one side of the plate as well, one half of it. And if you're going to let guys get comfortable in the box on you, they're going to make your job even more tougher, because they're taking money out of your pocket. And I never really thought of it like that. And so that was a big learning curve for me. And the other funny story to that was, we were playing Frank Thomas, the Hall of Famer, with Chicago. And I played Frank 3 years. He was at Auburn when I was at LSU for 3 years.
Oh, that's right. That's awesome.
And so Messina couldn't get him out. I couldn't get him out. Sut couldn't get him out. And it was the second game of the series. And Sut comes to me and he goes, listen. He said, I'm going to give you $500 if you make Frank Thomas very uncomfortable in your game, because I'm pitching tomorrow. And I said, well, I don't have a problem with that, because I don't like Frank anyway. Now, me and Frank are friends anyway, but he was a hell of a hitter, especially with some aluminum bat.
Yeah, I could imagine.
He was a Hall of Famer, you know. And so I go in there, and I get 0-2 in the first inning, and nobody on. I get the first 2 out, and Frank comes to the plate. And so I cut a 2-seamer loose right inside, and it hit him right in his big old thigh. And it boinked him right there.
Ball just stopped.
And it just rolled back towards the mound. That's how solid it was. Well, not only did Frank come out of the game, he couldn't even be in the lineup the next day when Sut pitched. And Sut gave me $1,000.
I was like, he better double that money right
Sut
there.
Gave me $1,000. He said, Big Ben, you're my favorite. You're my favorite. You know, and I wasn't trying to hit Frank. I was just trying to push him back.
Right.
Frank was a big dude, and he dove
Yep.
out across. And I got in a situation where I could straighten him up a little bit. Well, it just happened to get a little bit too far inside, and it hit him, you know. And so those are the things that you learn. And, you know, we never tried to hit anybody. We never tried to throw the ball up here. That's a no-no. But if we hit somebody, it was going to be below the waist, you know, and that's just part of the game. And so you had to make guys uncomfortable. I don't think pitchers in today's world do that quite as much as we used to do it.
Yep.
But it was certainly a big part of our game, and we had to have hitters respect us. That was just part of it.
Yeah, no, I love that old school game. That's kind of the way that I was taught in the beginning. A lot of my coaches coming up was like, same thing. I think bigger dudes, right? Like sometimes you're a gentle giant, right? They try to get you going, and it's fun when you start figuring that out.
Yeah,
You're moving their feet a little bit.
The light bulb starts to
Yeah.
flicker. And I remember Scott Boris was my agent. He kept telling me, Ben, you're going to need to get about 200 innings in the big leagues before the light bulb starts to flicker a little bit. And he was right. I felt like when I got to that 150, and you never learn it all, but you start to get more comfortable about, as you know, you were a starter. What's your routine every day? What do you do in the days that you pitch? And I started to get into a routine of how I wanted to attack the day, how I wanted to attack hitters when the game started. I always had a game plan, which I didn't have a game plan at first. And so you kind of learn how to manage your time and manage the game. And then you have a backup plan, like if things change, to be able to adapt in the middle of a ball game and pitch a guy a little bit differently than what the scouting report said, you know. And so all those things come in with just getting time, getting starts, getting innings. You feel more comfortable. Like any job, you're a little more comfortable about what you're doing and what your approach is.
No, I love it. Now you had it sounds like you had a lot of good leadership when you were in the major leagues and Pro Bowl and stuff. Was Skip still involved in that when you got to Pro Bowl? Because obviously he probably was a big influence when you were here.
Absolutely. And, you know, I bump stuff off of Skip all the time, you know.
That's
and
awesome.
I would call him and say, Coach, I'm struggling, you know, this, that. Well, how's this for keeping your front shoulder? And he always had words of encouragement for me. But it was a lot of mental stuff with Skip, you know. And Dale Brown is one of the best motivators there ever was. And so I was, as you mentioned, I mean, who gets to play for Dale Brown and Skip Bertman? You know,
awesome.
I mean, nobody does. And so I was very fortunate. And when you're an 18, 19-year-old kid, you don't realize what you have. It's like years later when you get out and you start having kids on your own, you start going, man, how fortunate was I to be coached by those two dudes right there, because they shaped my life in so many different ways. And then when I went on to coach kids, I coached my daughter for 6 years of fast pitch softball. Then I coached my son for 6 years. I was able to share some of those experiences and stories and how I came about to get to where I was with these kids, which was very, very rewarding for me to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love hearing that. And I love Skips. He's one of my favorite people. And just I always tell people I came on my visit. He was the AD, and I spent 5 minutes in his office, 10 minutes in his office. They just did the thing. But every time I see him, he goes, "How's Angelo?" And he remembers my dad's name. I'm like, how do you? Like,
the dude doesn't forget anything. I don't know how he does that, but it's like he can recall any moment in a game, whether the SEC, it was an SEC tournament, a regular season game, College World Series. His memory. But that's what made him so great. You know, that's what made him so great. His memory of calling pitches and how to set up hitters was so next level. But you don't think about those things when you're playing, you know. But I was fortunate with Skip for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you got to spend some time with Baltimore. How many years were it? Seven
with Baltimore, yep.
And then how did you end up in Milwaukee? Were you
so
traded?
My first arm issue gave me some problems, and they found a tear in my rotator cuff, about a 50% tear. The doctors I went and saw said, he's still good to pitch. It's going to take a rehab program, whatever. Right. Well, the Orioles non-tendered me that year. They wasn't sure. They said, let's see what the market's going to do, what the market's going to offer, and then we'll circle back. Well, Milwaukee jumped in and offered a 2-year contract right away. And the Orioles came back with just a 1-year contract, so I was off and moving towards Milwaukee. You know, and had a great first year over there. Pitched really well, threw over 200 innings, and had a really good ERA. And then the second year is when the arm troubles started to come back again. And that's when the surgery started and all that kind of stuff. And make a long story short, it didn't work out after 3 surgeries. And heck, I was retired at 29 years old. You know, just when you're kind of really starting to figure it out, you know, it's over in a flash. And that was another dark time in my life, you know, and I'm sure you went through it too, to where all of a sudden baseball and sports is your life from the time you're 5 or 6 years old to when I was 29 years old. And all of a sudden, in a breath, it's gone. Yeah. Like it's gone, really, you know, fast, and so I was a bad husband, and I was hard to be around, and it almost cost me my marriage, to be honest with you. But there was some dark times in that, and we pulled through it with the help of my wife and some counseling and some other things. You know, we got through it, and I realized I'm 30 years old, and I got the rest of my life in front of me, and now what are you passionate about? What else do you want to do? And that's when Skip came along and said, hey, I think you'd be great being an analyst in college baseball. And I was like, Coach, I don't know. I said, I didn't keep score when I first started. I didn't do any homework. And now it's evolved into where it is now, where I'm prepping for 2 hours a day for every game and all that kind of stuff, you know. And so I really enjoy the game. It was my way of kind of staying in touch with the game of baseball, staying involved. And then the Orioles started asking me back, 10 or 12 years ago to start doing some games with them and being in uniform. And so it's still kind of my way of just staying in touch with baseball. And I really enjoy, calling games. It's not an easy job. It's very difficult to do. When I first started, you could trick people when you're only doing 10 or 12 games a year.
Yeah.
You can kind of fool some folks. But when you start doing 50, 60, 100, 140 games a year, now I can't trick you anymore. So I got to be good at what I do. I got to be prepared at what I do. And so my parents taught me at a young age, how you do anything is how you do everything. And I learned that when I was 7 years old. And so I just dove into baseball, and I dove into doing my prep work and being ready for a ball game and being able to go different ways, being able to tell stories and more or less just talk about the game of baseball. And I'll tell you a quick funny story. I was in Walmart when I first started calling baseball games over 20 years ago, and there was this older woman in Walmart. She said, "You're so-and-so." I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she goes, you call the LSU Baseball? I said, "Yes, ma'am, I do." She said, "I love how you call a game." I said, "Whoa." I said, "It's only like my second or third year." I said, "Well, tell me what you like about what I do, because I'm trying to figure this." She said, "I don't watch baseball. I don't know that much about baseball at all. But when you talk about baseball, I understand what you're saying because you keep it simple."
Nice.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yep.
It just blew up in my head. I went, oh, my gosh. That's going to be my audience. That's who I want to go after. I can talk about forced balks and bunt plays and cutoffs and relays and all the complicated stuff that doesn't happen that much in baseball. Or I can keep it simple, and I can kind of draw in the person that's watching baseball for the first time or the person that doesn't watch much baseball at all. And I want to keep this simple to try to – I may bore you like you. If you know a lot about the game, I may bore you from time to time. That's okay. But I'm out for the person watching for the first time and learning the game of baseball. I went, I'm always going to remember that. Baseball is a simple game, right? You throw it 1,000 times. You catch it, you throw it, you hit it. It's a simple game. We can make it complex if we choose to. But it's a simple game. And I've always taken that advice from her. That was over 20 years ago. I said, I'm going to keep this as simple as I can. There'll be times we'll dive into analytics. And there'll be times we'll dive. But 80% of my broadcast is I'm going to try to keep the game simple for everybody to understand.
Wow. I love that. But I like listening to you call games too, though, because I appreciate the way that the knowledge of the game and everything. Yeah. I enjoy listening to you call a game too, as somebody who's played a billion games in his life too and watched it too. So you appeal to all the audiences. That's really good. I love that she was able to say that to you. And to me, again, one of the things running a business, right? Communication is so important. How do you connect with people? And so for you to be able to understand that, ask her what your strengths were, and then double down on that for the rest of your career. I love it. That's awesome.
You remember things about it. You in the business world, you remember. So when you get a chance to talk to people, sometimes it really makes sense, and you take. There's a lot of advice you're going to get that's just going to go one ear out the other, whatever. But every now and then something's going to hit home with you like that, and that really hit home with me when she said that. So I was like, okay, that's where I want to go. That's going to be my audience from now on.
Really cool. Yeah, I love that. So you got the broadcasting, but I would love to talk. I'm not a hunter. I'm not an outdoorsman. I like fishing. I grew up fishing with my dad, but my dad's a hunter. Now, I know that's a big passion of yours. Are you involved in it business-wise? I know I've seen you on some channel, right? You're on TV sometimes with that stuff too?
Yeah, so one of my big buddies is Bill Jordan, who owns Real Tree Outdoors, Real Tree Camouflage. Cool. And so I've known Bill since 1990, and I've hunted with him every year. But I was passionate about the outdoors way before that. That's one of the things. I think when you're born in Livingston Parish, where I'm born, when you're born, you get a camouflage T-shirt and a shotgun. I mean, that's what you get. It's
in your crib, probably, right?
So I grew up. My dad was a big hunter, and my grandfather was, my uncles were, and so I kind of grew up in the woods whenever I could. Now, I also played basketball and football, and so I didn't get a chance to hunt as much as a youngster as I wanted to hunt, especially when I got into junior high, high school, and even in college. But once I got into pro ball, it worked out perfectly because the season would typically end in October. Then you got the rest of the off season to continue to work out, but also enjoy hunting. And of course, once I retired, that was when I first got into pro ball. I didn't buy a nice truck or a big house. I bought some land. I bought land up in Mississippi when I was 21 years old, and I started to buy more land over the years. And so that's just a passion of mine. It was kind of my way of being able to recharge the batteries in the off season, to be able to get away, climb up in a tree, just hear the birds. If I killed something, it was great. If I didn't, I still had a wonderful day. But it was kind of my way of just getting away and breathing a little bit and recharge the batteries in the off season, you know. And so I still love it today. I still spend a lot of my time, matter of fact, most of my off season is spent up at the farm in Mississippi. And I don't know, I just love it. And I got into bow hunting 30 years ago, and I hadn't even hunted with a gun in over 20 years now. All I do is bow hunt because as athletes, we like to be challenged.
Yeah, that's
and
what
the biggest challenge to hunting is bow hunting.
Yeah.
Because you got to get the animals so close to you. You got to make the right shot and all that to find them. And so that was just a way to go challenge myself, is be a bow hunter. You know, nothing against rifle hunting, because I hunted a lot with a rifle when I was really young. And but I enjoy the bow hunting side of things. I think it's the most challenging way of going to hunt. And I just enjoy being in the outdoors. I enjoy hunting and fishing and all those things because it relaxes me. And even with the job I do today, it is a stressful job. I'm going from home a lot, but it's still my way of getting away and just kind of resetting and letting everything just kind of reshape again.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I love the challenge side of the like you said, we're athletes, right? And to me, if I was gonna hunt, that's what I would want to do. I would want to try, all that stuff.
Well, you're a competitor your whole life, so now what are you going to compete at, right? You got to find something to compete at. At first, when I first broke away, I really got into golf, and I joined University Club. I'm still a member there, and man, I really got into golf. And I wouldn't play every day, but I'd go to the driving range every day, man. I'd hit balls for an hour. I'd chip and I'd putt and I'd play once a week, and I got really good. I got the handicap almost scratch, and when I was playing a lot. But then this baseball commentating stuff started, and I'm one of those guys, man. If I can't spend time doing it, I don't want to be a guy that shows up and plays golf once a month and never practices. If I'm going to do something, I got to be all in on it. And so I hadn't played much golf probably in the last 10 or 12 years. Still a member, but I'm hoping one day to get back to playing a little bit of golf because I do love it.
Yeah, I love it. I didn't even realize we've been talking for 45 minutes, so I'm gonna let you get out of here in a couple minutes. But I wanted to pick your brain. The college landscape for sports has really changed a lot. Obviously, you're in the broadcasting world, so you're still in tune with it. Obviously, know Jay Johnson and probably the program and stuff. What are your thoughts on the NIL and the transfer portal and all the stuff that has changed our game so much nowadays?
I said it 3 years ago, and I'm going to say it again.
Yeah.
It's an absolute train wreck. I knew it was going to be a train wreck. It's turned into a train wreck. Yeah. I have not talked to one coach in the last 3 years that thinks it's a good idea. Not one.
It's scary.
I'm okay with players making money, athletes making money. That is fine with me. I think there should be a cap on it. I think there should be a cap on what universities can spend, because the NCAA has always been about parity. We're going to keep it parity. Yeah. This is the furthest thing from parity that 100%. We're experiencing. The mid-majors have become nothing more than a feeder program to the D1 schools.
Exactly.
And you talk to the mid-major coaches, and they're just pulling their hair out because they're taking chances on kids that nobody wanted in the Power 5 schools. They're developing these kids. They're turning them into rock stars, and all of a sudden here comes the big schools, and they're sucking them away. The other thing I hate about this is players now are starting to hold universities hostage over money. It's happening every day.
It's crazy.
I don't like that either. Yeah. And the transfer portal, I guess I got a bigger problem with being able to transfer more than I do players being paid. You know, I don't think you should be able to transfer unless your coach leaves, you got a coaching change, Joe Burrow, you graduated, you can leave there. But now we're like, you can play at Tennessee 1 year if you want to. And if they offer more money over there, you can go to LSU. And if they offer more money the next year, you can go to Auburn. To me, that just doesn't seem right, because the coaches hate it. Because used to be when I got you on campus, I had you for 3 years. I knew you were going to be there. Yeah. Now I don't know. And the coaches I talk to privately tell me, I'm scared to coach some of the kids that I have there. I'm scared to draw the best out of them, because if I piss them off too bad, they're going to take their little white ball and they're going to go somewhere else. And so now we're in a situation where coaches are afraid to coach kids in order to make them better, to help their program win, because they don't want to piss them off. And so I don't know. I got a lot of bad thoughts about that. I think for the most part, it's trying to be done right, but I'm not a favor of, and I'm certainly not a fan of a kid that wants to jump here, jump there. It's almost like travel ball again, right? Yeah. Travel ball, right? If little Johnny comes to your team.
Who's going to let me play for free? Who's going to give me this?
I want to play shortstop. I want to bat third.
Yep.
Well, Johnny, you're not good enough to play shortstop because Bobby's better than you are. But you know what? If you work your tail off, maybe in a month or so, I'll give you a shot. No, Bobby just goes to the next team. Yep. This has turned into, okay, I want to go to LSU, and I'm good enough to play at LSU. Oh, I'm not that good. And competition all of a sudden competition piece in college sports to me is a bad word now for whatever reason.
I know.
I always tell young kids, Michael Jordan got cut. Shaquille O'Neal got cut from his high school team because he wasn't good enough. Michael didn't transfer high school. His mom said, go work your butt off this summer. You go back and you show that coach how good you are.
Yep.
Michael goes back, and he becomes Michael Jordan. But he will tell you that what shaped his life in a lot of ways is not making a team, but it made him and forced him to all of a sudden work harder and compete more to get to where you want to go. Competition, and I tell kids this all the time, competition is so important, not only in sports, but in everyday life, in business life, competing for whatever you want to compete for. You learn how to compete at the sports level, but it also prepares you for life, competing for a job, competing for anything that you do. So you got to learn how to compete. It's the easy thing is to walk away.
Right.
And once you walk away once, and that was always like it probably was in your family, Mom, Dad always told me, if you're going to start it, you're going to finish it.
100%.
You finish what you start.
Yep.
If you don't want to play next year, then we won't play.
Yep.
But you're not quitting. And the point was, once you start to do that, then it becomes easier to do it again. And I think that works. My marriage, it's been a really good marriage, but there's always ups and downs in marriages. But I think too many people walk away from marriages now, not willing to fight for each other and fight for the love that you had at one point, And so, nobody in my family, knock on wood, has ever been divorced. My parents showed the way on how to do that. It wasn't
awesome.
easy. And so I took all that to heart, And so, I love the college game. I think baseball's rocking on. We're more popular than we ever have been. I love that piece of it. I just wish it would get cleaned up in some ways with the NIL and the transfer portal. That's all, And so I don't know what the right thing is. I just know it's a very difficult time for coaches right now.
No, that's why I wanted to hear your opinion on it, because that's what I'm nervous about. I think we have lost accountability as athletes, and like you said, that competitive drive to be like, no, I'm going to outwork this dude. Instead, there's an option to go somewhere else. You don't take accountability for him being better than you and you going in and put in the work so you can be the best version of yourself. You're just like, there's an avenue here that I can go that's easier. And
it's too easy to walk away, that's what kids have to learn today. And I get it. We live in a society now where we want it right now.
Exactly.
We want it right.
Instant gratification.
But I always tell kids, sometimes you got to go here, 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 here to eventually get to where you want to go. Very seldom do you get from right here to right here and it's a straight line where you want to be. That doesn't happen in the real world very often. And that's what business or any endeavor you go through in your life. And so it's a rocky road. It's a difficult time, but it's what shapes you as youngsters to be able to go do those things and compete on what you do, And so it's a difficult time, but I love the college game where I think football's great, basketball's great, and, of course, baseball is just rocking on.
No, it really is. It's a great time, but like you said, hopefully we can clean this stuff up, and hopefully there's nothing that's too disrupted, with all these conferences and all that shit. So, I hope we get it cleaned up sooner than later. But, Ben, dude, this was amazing. Joe, is there anything else you think we would you'd want to ask? Because this man has obviously got some gold in the stories and stuff like that.
If that plays out across all sports, I don't know what that's going to turn into or what's going to come of that, but I think that could lead to a situation where now universities are offering contracts with potential buyouts for transfer stuff.
That could be better.
And if it comes to that, I'm curious your opinion.
Yeah, I think it's more of the same, and, here's my thing. If you want to be paid money, go play pro sports right away.
Right, just get signed out of high
school.
school.
If you're that good, go do it. You know what I mean?
That's the one thing I feel like we miss with college sports now. Was like, that's the point. You had a decision. If you were good enough, you had a chance to go pro.
Right.
And you could have. And you could go grind and go get your endorsement deals and stuff. But you chose to go to school. And it's like, you can get some endorsement deals, but don't hold these schools hostage. Like, one of my best friends is a recruiting coordinator and he's just like, dude, I'm lost. I don't know what to do. Like, he's figuring it out, but it's like, you're figuring it out on the fly and being like, I guess this is right. We're figuring it out. And like, now there's all these sanctions coming out about college football too, where these coaches did it wrong. And it's like, well, they were probably just keeping up with what everybody else was doing too. Right. So it's like, who are we going to, and the rules have changed so many times. It's a mess. I don't know. Yeah. Sorry. I get going on that stuff.
To me, it's very confusing. It's very confusing. And for the coaches, I think it's very confusing for them what the rules are. It wasn't supposed to be pay for play, but it feels like that's what it is now.
You almost have to.
And so, I don't know. And can the NIL, can the collectives continue to put out that kind of money every year? I mean, do you have those kind of pockets within your programs to where I can hit you up every year for $1 million? I can hit them up, or do I have so many that I can maybe hit you one year, come back and hit you, then come back over here?
Right.
So I mean, I don't know. I don't know, but I know it's anything but parity. Which is what the NCAA has always said we were about, and we're not about parity anymore. And so I don't know. I just think there needs to be. It's almost like it's the Wild West, and anything goes. And I just think there needs to be some structure put in it, more structure. But the NCAA, like they've done so many times, I'm not a fan.
No.
I think they've screwed up some really big hot topic issues over the last few years, but it's it is what it is. It's more of the same. And so hopefully somebody's going to take the bull by the horns and try to figure this out a little bit, at least put some regulations in there, because, I mean, if they unionize like you're talking about, I mean, what's the end game there? What is the end game? I mean, they can just move every year they want to move. They can hold teams hostage. They can say, I'm the only thinking we're going to play tonight. We're just going to sit the game out unless we all get raises or whatever.
Right.
I mean, what's it coming to?
They're going to stake and strike. Yeah.
What's it that we're going to strike, and all of a sudden we're not going to show up and play the big football game. And so I don't know where we're going, but it just feels like it's starting to spin more and more out of control for me. And that worries me about our game. It really does.
Yeah.
So that was my perspective of it, was from the university standpoint. If the players cannot unionize, it seems like the safest option for the university to put them on contract for probably less money than they're making in NIL.
Right.
Over the course of, hey, we got you for 3 years, or we got you for 4 years. And then if another university wants to go pick them up in the transfer portal, now they have a contract they have to buy out. Same
Right.
way it is for coaches. So that was kind of my perspective of, okay, that's something that the university could do to limit transfer portal.
Yeah. And it's so early in all this litigation. Like, it's so crazy. What's going to be passed, what's not, what's going to actually
I'm
go
all
through.
for transferring. Okay, if you want to transfer, fine. Sit out a year.
Exactly.
Sit
Take
out a year
accountability.
like we used to have to do. That will change your mind. And what it will also do is make you make a more – right now kids are jumping so much. We got 8th graders committing. We got 9th graders committing. You don't really know what you want in 8th and 9th grade. You don't know who the coach is going to be. But they all commit now, and they sign now knowing that they can transfer if things aren't right, and they don't miss anything. But I think if there's more accountability as far as, hey, make sure you make the right decision and you think about this a little bit. I wish the NCAA would back that up a little bit and say, okay, you can't commit until your junior year or your senior year.
Right.
I think that would help a lot of these young kids out. But there's a lot of things, if I was in charge, I think I would probably change. But, it's we are where we are now. So now you just got to deal with it and try to figure it out. I hate it for the coaches because their jobs have become a lot more difficult than what they used to be.
Yep. Well, Ben, this was pretty tremendous, so I appreciate it. Where can I know you're big on Twitter, right? You do a lot of tweet. Real Ben McDonald.
I hadn't been that active lately, but it's Real Ben McDonald on Twitter and Instagram. But with baseball season coming, I'll probably get a little more active with it coming around. So I enjoy social media and hanging out with the fans and talking to the fans a little bit. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to LSU Baseball. We're kicking that off Friday night against VMI, I think it is, Virginia Military Institute. Don't know anything about them other than they really hit it well last year, but didn't pitch too good. But I'm excited about this year, and Jay, I don't think there's going to be a hangover with LSU baseball like it was. Mississippi State won it 2 years ago. It's been a 2-year hangover. Ole Miss won it, year before last. It's been a hangover with them. I don't think it's going to be that way for Jay. I think he's got a pretty good pulse and a really exciting team coming back.
Yeah, he runs a tight ship, so I'm excited to see how he does it this year, and we'll be out there. So I'm sure I'll see you out there, but I appreciate the time.
Anytime.
Yep. Everybody, make sure you go check out Ben. He's got great content on social media, and if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you guys go give him a follow and share this episode, like it, do all that good stuff. And I want to say a special thank you to 7-3 Distilling and St. Rock Vodka. St. Rock Vodka is the official vodka of the Bayou Traditions Collective, ironically enough, what we're talking about with NIL and stuff. But that means you can buy a bottle of vodka with St. Rock, and portions go back into that NIL collective and help our LSU student athletes and things like that. And we wouldn't be able to do what we do without St. Rock and 7-3 Distilling, and also Rejuvenate Medical, the anti-aging clinic here in Baton Rouge. So thank you guys for being here, and we'll see you again soon.